That was an amazing experience with Roe Deer because I just got so close. That one just was not a good session. I'm really not happy with how that went. Wildlife photography can be so varied, and sometimes you go through just about every emotion there is. Now in this video I'm going to share with you all the ups and downs from my local project here photographing Roe Deer. 4:30 AM start today and there's no way around it. It's just simply painful. So I'm here just around sunrise, try and take advantage of the early morning, hopefully get some great conditions with these Roe Deer. No two experiences are the same when you're photographing Roe Deer. It's just different all the time. I'd got into a position, I was just waiting, see if that deer would come to me, when all of a sudden I heard some barking directly behind me, and I thought there's probably a buck stood there checking me out, and I slowly turned around and there's actually two deer hinds, and the one deer hind was just fascinating. So she just kept walking back and forth, just prancing along, looking at me, trying to look at me from different angles. Obviously knew I was there, more kind of curious than concerned. She did give the occasional bark, but she must have done this for a good 2 or 3 minutes, just back and forth. I did manage to grab a few pictures slowly, and I just tried to sit there and just be quiet, just let them get a bit used to me, and eventually they decided to move on. So yeah, as always, a mixed bag. Always learning with Roe Deer. Sometimes you just get lucky and the deer are already there where you want them to be. Well, this is very different. I'm halfway down the lane and straight away I see a Roe Deer in the middle of the first field. Now this is a field that I always enter for when I start to look for them. Three deer. I think they're all females. Looking into the sun. They don't know I'm here. I'm really not sure the best approach. In fact, I might not approach at all. So that is the dominant buck. But there's very few feelings as good as when everything falls into place and you get to spend time close with the deer. Roe Deer session number 6 today, and that was just absolutely incredible. That was an amazing experience with Roe Deer because I just got so close, and it didn't look like it was going to go well. It didn't start off too well. I could see in fact 4 Roe Deer in the distance, but quite some distance away. I just went to my usual spot and hoped they'd come down to graze in the field, and then as I got to the corner, kind of the corner of their main field where they spend a lot of time, and there's a gate there, and I just quickly caught sight of a roebuck literally right round the corner, not far away. So obviously I just stopped really quickly and got low down. Was the main thing. I got really low down and I was able to take some pictures, and then I could see another one, a female in the background. So there was 2 deer there. And I was even able to get my chair, so I pulled my chair towards me because I just dumped it on the ground, and I got the chair up and I sat on there and I just quietly photographed both these Roe Deer probably for a good 15 minutes, I would say. And then the Roe buck, interestingly, he obviously noticed something, maybe he smelt me, I'm not too sure, and he started checking me out. You can tell when they're really looking, they're really getting suspicious, so he was really staring at me for quite some time. And then he sprinted off. He didn't look too alarmed, just kind of sprinted off again, looked back. And then the doe Roe Deer just stayed there for probably a good 10 minutes, and I photographed her, and she was just so relaxed. That's the most amazing thing. It's to photograph subjects when they're relaxed like that, and you can tell from the images, which I'll share with you, that these animals are just completely relaxed. They're grooming, they're licking. But of course there are going to be times where things just don't quite go to plan. So that was a good example there, that it's not always going to go well. That was like quite an unsuccessful shoot, although I saw the deer, got reasonable distance, but no, the pictures weren't as good today. So I made a couple of approaches. One, the deer just disappeared through the hedgerow, but they were absolutely fine. They didn't know I was there. And then the second one was a good half an hour later, and there was a buck and a doe kind of in the far field, towards the sort of the hillside, and I made an approach, and I got the chair in, sat down, and then I realised that the wind was kind of from behind me, which there's nothing you can do at that point. I'm already sat there, and both of them just started to look suspicious. Both of them went back to grazing. The female seemed okay with me after a while, and then the buck just suddenly seemed to know I was there, and it could have been the wind, again, my scent, it was picking up. And he started trotting off, and then he actually barked. So that was the first bark I've had of the season from the Roe Deer, and that generally means that they're alarmed. So if they bark, it means they're alarmed in some way. I'm pretty sure he's barking at me. Now I have a rule which I set last year, which is if I've obviously disturbed a deer or more than one deer, then I don't go back the next day. So however good the conditions are, I just don't go back, because I want to give them at least a day's break, just with no disturbance. So tomorrow, for at least tomorrow, maybe 2 days, I won't go back. And undoubtedly there's going to be times where everything felt like a complete disaster. Everything you did seemed wrong, and sometimes you can beat yourself up. Two Roe Deer. I think it's two does. Right at the edge of the field. There's like a gully and a stream right at the edge of there feeding. So it's actually a doe and a buck. I think it's the younger buck, and they've come out into the open. Now they're just sort of almost behind this ridge. Gonna go out of view in a minute. That one just was not a good session. I'm really not happy with how that went. So there was two deer, a doe and a buck, and they came out really into the centre of the field, really in the open, just kind of behind a bit of a ridge. And the buck actually settled down. He actually sat down on the ground in the grass, so I thought this could be a really good opportunity. And the doe carried on walking. She was kind of walking further into the field to my left, so I made the decision to try and kind of get in front of her, because I'd rather the deer come to me. They're both sort of looking in that direction, so I made a decision, so I think that was always going to be better. Now what happened is what sometimes happens with roe deer, which is a big problem, and that is that it wasn't the two deer that I was watching, that I was focusing on, that caused the problem. It was actually a third one. So as I was walking across fairly slowly, there was a third deer which definitely spotted me and then alerted the other two. All three ran off, which was not good. So that's just a good reminder that really whenever you're focusing on the deer, you're watching one or two, maybe even three, just make sure there isn't another one. This has happened countless times to me, and however many deer you've got as well, you've got to try to watch all their behaviour and reactions. The only thing I probably should have done better there was to take a wider approach. In hindsight, Roe Deer, doe site. In hindsight, I think I should have actually come back, put more distance between me and the deer to get in front, just to give them more distance. But you know, this is how you learn. Every session with the deer is a learning curve. One thing I learned more than anything at all was that I didn't always have to take great pictures. In fact, I didn't always have to take pictures at all. Roe Deer session number 5, and that has got to be the best session so far. No pictures, so you might be thinking, why was it the best session? It just, like, everything just went well, and I think went as it should. I feel like I did everything right, didn't really do anything stupid, make any mistakes. The first time I took my secret weapon down as well, my little chair, my tiny little mini chair, and I could see, was it 4 deer in the distance, really quite far away, like 2 fields over, but they were coming in the direction of where they usually hang out. So I thought, if I go down there, there's a good chance they're going to come this way, they're going to start grazing in one of their favoured spots. And it didn't take that long for me to get to the corner of the field, and I was just about to put the chair down, and I saw one of the deer in the far corner, just like the silhouette I could make out, and she was just basically just entering the field. And I thought for a second I'd been rumbled, but it was okay, she came through. So I just got my chair down and just sat myself down there by the gate in the corner, and I'd just been there for like the last hour probably. And she came through and she was grazing for ages on her own. Got some footage, and then I'm wondering, you know, at some point thinking the other 3 are going to come down. I know they are, and sure enough, after what must have been nearly an hour, the other 3 deer came through a gap in the hedgerow, and then there was actually 2 bucks, which was fascinating. 2 does and 2 bucks, and I just saw so much behaviour. I was just sat there quietly on the chair. I think the lower profile helps, and so much behaviour, some of which I managed to film. There was 1 buck, kind of looked like it chased off a female, 2 females which came together. But yeah, so much behaviour there. They never came really close for pictures, but just the fact I was able to sit there for probably about an hour and a half and watch them, and I felt like I never disturbed them, and they never at any point really looked disturbed or alarmed. And then managed to get myself back to retrace my steps without being seen. So yeah, really good progress today. My photo shoots were generally in the evening, but it was important to try some mornings as well, because you've always got a chance of capturing some atmosphere first thing. Good morning everybody, it's about 6 o'clock, not too long after sunrise. The light levels are very low this morning, there's lots of cloud around. I think it's going to break a little bit, but what I'm going to do today is try and test the camera a little bit in terms of shutter speed and IBIS on the camera with my 400mm lens. So I'm actually going to put it onto manual exposure, 125th of a second at f6.3. And then auto ISO, so the ISO is just going to fluctuate when it starts to get a little bit brighter, and 125th of a second for hand holding, so that's fairly slow, but I'm just going to test it today to see if I can get sharp images. And I'm also going to try and lower the ISO a bit, so I'm going to limit the ISO here on automatic ISO to 1600, so it's never going to go above 1600, so I'm going to get a combination of a slow shutter speed but also a lower ISO. He's feeding on the hawthorn shoots. Got 2 deer in the field. Oh, one of them spotted me. It's looking Keeps moving from side to side, trying to weigh me up, trying to figure out what's there. I've got 2 females, 2 does, really quite close, just feeding at the edge of the field. Oh, they're completely relaxed. The lights got better, the sun's come up, the light's on them. So in terms of the exposure, trying to use a slower shutter speed and a lower ISO and testing the IBIS, that kind of all just went to pot really. It just didn't happen this morning, and that was because of the encounters that I had, which is often the case. So it didn't start off too well, because the first one I'd seen a buck, and then I got close to the edge of the field, but I was in a really bad situation. I was I was stood up and I was kind of behind a hedgerow, and I just think it's like one of the worst situations. They just seem to suss you out. You look like more of a threat, which makes sense to me. And despite staying still, they did definitely figure me out. They weren't happy, and they ran off back to the other side of the field. And I decided at that point I wasn't going to try and look for any more deer this morning, because I'd already disturbed a couple. So I just got my chair and I just literally sat out in the open in the middle of the field, and I thought I'd just wait and see if anything comes to me. And sure enough, after probably about half an hour, a couple of does did come into the field where I was, and they were walking along the hedgerow. They were feeding in there, sometimes kind of going into the shadows low down, feeding on something, maybe the hawthorn. And I just tried to stay still. I didn't always pick up the camera to photograph. I just watched them in the hope that they're just getting used to what they could see. Being sat down, I think that made such a big difference there. And they did definitely see something. They were checking me out. And then eventually one of the does just really started looking a lot more seriously, became a bit suspicious, and then they turned around and they disappeared into the hedgerow. But the good thing was they didn't run away. I certainly didn't get barked at. They just sort of trotted off. The bucks were always fascinating to watch and photograph, and I often saw 2 different individuals. But one particular evening I realised there was in fact more bucks in the area, and what unfolded became without a doubt one of the best experiences I've ever had. Wow, what can I say about that one? That was just absolutely, that was incredible. Bit of a weird one really, but just shows you just with a bit of perseverance what you can get. So I kind of saw there was 2 groups. There was what looks like the dominant male, and I think it was 3 does with him. And I was kind of just following them right on the other side of the field, and they're walking along the hedgerow, and they went into the hedgerow and then into the far field behind that. And then another group approached and stood briefly in the middle of the field. I got some shots at that. Wasn't the best light. But then I decided the first group, I was going to try and get close to them in case they kind of hung around, in case they came back. So I'd headed over that way, and as soon as I kind of got to that corner, I spotted the second group, which had run across, and they were in the field on the eastern side, which I don't tend to spend too much time. And they were right at the other end of the field, kind of walking along the tree line, just grazing. Now on this side of the field is a blackthorn hedge, and it was just completely in shade because it was getting quite late, like 7:30, nearly 8 o'clock. So it was totally in shade. It just made the perfect place for me to stop and watch. So I just basically sat myself down there in my chair with my back against the hedge. I know it's difficult for them to see me, and the wind was perfect. The wind was in my face as well, and I knew this is the perfect situation. And I just decided I'll just wait and see. They look like they're coming my direction, and just see if they do. And sure enough, they did. They actually started running. So I think it was the buck first started running and chasing the doe, and it was just absolutely incredible. Just running in my direction, bounding in all directions. They ran right across, so close. Frame-filling shots, absolutely frame-filling shots. One of them stopped. I think both stopped. I got some static shots. And then a second group, another buck and a doe, I think did almost exactly the same thing, just a bit further away. And what was fascinating about that too was just the social interaction and the number of them. I mean, I definitely saw 5, 6 at one point. I think there might have been like at least 7, if not 8 deer down there. But the interactions, there's 2 bucks for sure, and then I realised there's a third buck. There's definitely a third buck. One that has, you know, proper developed antlers, he looks like the dominant one, and 2 that have really nice velvet antlers, but they just look not as dominant. They look like younger bucks to me. But I'm pretty sure that I saw a second one with full grown antlers as well, so I think there's definitely 3 bucks, but I think there might actually be 4, and they're just all interacting with each other, bucks and does, and at times it's just really difficult to know what's going on in terms of their kind of social hierarchy and all that kind of thing. But just lots of behaviour. Some of the bucks were doing thrashing with their antlers, kind of thrashing against the blackthorn and scratching. It's just really interesting. And my hands are still a bit numb because they were just getting so cold. My nose is a bit cold. The wind was getting really strong and the sun had almost gone down, so I was really starting to feel cold, but you just put up with it. You don't really worry about that too much. And eventually they just sauntered off far side of the field and I got up and left. That is without a doubt one of the best experiences I've ever had with roe deer. If you'd like to learn more about the camera settings I use to photograph the deer, then click on the video that's on the screen right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you somewhere in nature sometime soon.